This video illustrates how to manage users. This function is only available to users who are listed as administrators of the system. On the far left menu at the bottom, there's a section of administration. Again, this is not visible to all users, only to those who have administrative privileges. If you click on Manage Users, you begin with this view. To enroll a new user, we're going to click on that button, and that gives us this form to fill out. The fields with an asterisk are required. So we'll start a simple new user. Status, it will default to in use. When you want, as we'll talk about later, when we want to disable the user, we simply disable it here. We have an option to display a comment. Next is the language that this user would prefer to use. It's recommended that we start with English since the program is tested in English, although as the program undergoes its early stages of development, both Kinyarwanda and French will be options. SMS phones are optional. These are not used programmatically, but are used for as options for people and in the context list, so that patients can, so that other users can see the cell phone for this user. Reset password is not needed this time, but can be used in future. This is a temporary password that's assigned by the system. The password lock date is seldom used, but is an option if you want to lock it at a certain time. This is an important field, associated clinic. Every user should be associated with one or more clinics. In this case, we associated this new user with CHUK. You notice when we did that the message name automatically defaulted for CUHK. If we had picked a different associated clinic, then a different message name would have applied. The reason for this is that every user that is within a clinic will, in working in a clinic, will occasionally be getting messages from patients and will be working in the team of that clinic. So by having, in this case, CUHK as being the associated clinic, the message name is CUHK, so that if a patient then sends a message to one of the staff at CHUK, it will automatically show up on this user's list. You can have more than one group, so we could have this user have CHUK and be an administrator at the same time, or perhaps this user was seeing messages from the Batero Hospital while somebody was on vacation. Tour mode, this has to do with help screens. As a default, they're always available, but as a default, it's probably best to leave this disabled at the initiation. User role, there are two current user roles. Each user can be either an administrator or they can be staff member of a coagulation clinic. In this case, we're going to pick coagulation clinic. We'll talk more about this later time. So this sheet ends up being a instruction for the user. which can be printed or written down. The important part of this is the user's name and this temporary password. We will then, when the user wants to log in, they will go to this URL. They will put in the username and password. And the next time the user logs in, they will be prompted to change their password to a more permanent password, which will then be which will then be replaced on the sheet. We'll disable this user at in a few moments, just to show you how that is done. The other options are roles. As I mentioned, there are two roles. There's the admin role. These are settings that define what an administrator is allowed to do in the system. You notice that these are not editable. The reason is that they are determined by technical staff and must be set by technical staff. So additional roles may be developed, but it requires some knowledge of the back end of the system. And for this reason, we have the technical staff develop this. Coagulation clinic is the other role that we currently have in the system. You notice that the major differences are that under your files, that the coagulation clinic has INR patients and messages, whereas the admin also has INR review, reports, and security options that are not available to most users. These are message settings. So every user is defined as having one or more message names. This is a list of names that are available. And same thing applies to message groups. The user may have one or more message groups defined on this list. These are password rules. They seldom need to be changed. I'd recommend leaving them alone. But this is where it defines when a user, where definition is made when the user is changing their password, what the minimum requirements of the passwords are. Okay, so we're going to exit this. And then start a new session. And for Joe Test, this was a temporary password. And you'll notice that this user, who is a coagulation clinic staff user, does not have administrative functions on their menus. So we'll log out of that session. We're allowed to use that password only once. And the next time the user logs in, we'll be prompted to reset the password. So we'll put in the old password. we'll create a new password. And it doesn't like us to do that because they didn't make it complex enough. And now we've reset our password and have re-entered the system. So that will typically be the way that users will enter the system. We're going to log out of that and come back and log in one more time as an administrator. And now we can manage the users again. And so let's say, Joe left the area or was just a temporary user. So what we're going to do is take him off the list. And the way to do that is simply change from in use to disabled and save. And you'll see he's fallen down on the list as a disabled user, can no longer access the system. That wraps up managing users.